Number 1. I already submitted this one under the Ghost subreddit, but I thought it might get more traffic here. I'm interested to know what you guys think of my story. So, I've had quite a few paranormal experiences since I'm the first nation's Native American, and we tend to just accept the ghosts/spirits are real. It's a fact in my particular culture, Mohawk, that maybe I'm just more open than I realize. This is one of many stories, but definitely the most recent. I understand if people think I was dreaming when this happened, but I was wide awake. I was always wake up in the middle of the night at least once or twice, and I'm 100% aware. I'm not sure why though. So, I'm a history major. I loved the two world wars from a study viewpoint. I also do family genealogy in my spare time. I found a few soldiers in my tree, two that had died in the First World War. This year, 2016, is known as the biggest British military disaster ever. It was an absolute slaughter with no end. It lasted 2 to 3 months with a combined death count passing the million mark. Sad, heavy stuff. Ever since I discovered my great uncle Frank was killed during this battle, I have felt very strange when he comes to. I often feel remorse and sadness when I read about soldiers and those who suffered during and after the war, including a relative that I had who died as a POW. But with Frank, I get hysterical. I have bouts of intense depression. I can't describe it. He was killed on July 3rd, and his body was never found. AKA, he was likely destroyed by a shell. He was unmarried, rather poor, and only 21 years old. This was his first battle. Since I'm a little odd, I have no way of visiting the memorial with his name on it in France. I decide on the evening of July 2nd to attach a poppy to my cardigan and wear it to work the next day on the anniversary of his death. We wear them in November in Canada for remembrance. I made a brief Facebook status about him, thanking him for his service. Then I went on my way and my evening and didn't think about him at all. I went to bed as usual and woke up around 1 or 2 a.m. I'm not sure exactly what time. I had a feeling somebody was looking at me though. Sure enough, completely parallel and hanging above me, there was a man. He was all black and white, like an old photo would be, and in World War I era Tommy uniform, like to a T. He had his round, warm cheeks, and he had blonde hair tucked under his hat, but still visible on the sides. His eyes were very light, as if they were blue or green, but what struck me was he looked very sad, almost as if he was going to cry. He hung above me for roughly 5 seconds before I said, "Frank?" His face turned red, as if he had been brushed with a deep red acrylic. I now believe this was blood. I waved my hand over my face to see if I was dreaming or if he would disappear. Sometimes I awake dream, and this would always make the things that I see vanish. But he remained. He wasn't a dream, he was there. I closed my eyes for a few seconds and opened them to see he was gone. I remember feeling warm when I saw him, a sense of relief and safety, like I had been worried for weeks. I can only equate it to the feeling of when you see someone you haven't seen in a long time and they hug you. I also felt a weird sensation that he was my son. I know it sounds bonkers, but that's how I feel. His mother, Elizabeth, died 2 years after he did, very young. Cause of death was natural causes, according to official documents. Frank's death obviously destroyed her, as it did many families at the time. His father became an alcoholic and handed my 12-year-old great-grandmother to her aunt to come to Canada since he could no longer take care of her. Essentially, if he hadn't died, I would not exist. It is important to note that we have no photographs of Frank. I know the back of his attestation may lie his hair color, eye color, but I can't assess it until I have money to. Until then, I have this memory. I firmly believe it was him appearing at the exact moment of his death, especially with the time zone difference. 100 years later, the only person that knows him today. I'm very thankful that I got to see him. Number 2. Before I begin, I'd like to describe the layout of my house so it makes more sense. Hopefully it won't be too confusing. When you walk through the front door, you're in the living room. If you go straight and make a left turn, you will meet 3 different options. If you turn left, you'll be taken downstairs to a finished basement. If you go straight, you'll be brought into the garage. And if you go right, you'll be brought into the kitchen. Turn again, and you'll walk into the connected dining room. If you continue going straight, you'll be met with 4 options in a tiny hallway. It's about 2 steps. Turning left brings you into the bathroom. Going straight brings you into my friend's room. Further on the right, you'll be brought into her parents' bedroom, and close to you on the right is the entrance back into the living room. My friend's mom, we can call her Jay, was in the hospital for surgery. She has Crohn's disease, which can cause serious health issues. The story takes place during the summer, so I was able to stay for about 2 weeks and help get the house ready for her return. Jay was like a second mother to me, and so they had no problem with me staying alone with their chihuahua to clean the house and to cook sometimes. My friend Elle went to a summer program at the school near her house, so when she was gone from around 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., S, Jay's boyfriend, worked from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. So at 7, I'd be left alone to do whatever I liked. This was rough time for both S and J. They were fighting over silly things and didn't really get along. We would visit her at the hospital and leave a few hours later because they would get into an argument. While I was home alone, I'd hear things in the basement. I figured it was just a draft or a mouse or something that caused something else to move. My friend and I never felt comfortable in the basement though, like we had when we were younger. We didn't like walking past the open stairwell and feared that if we looked down the stairs, we'd see someone staring back at us. Or at least, that's how I felt. I never had experienced what I did during those 2 weeks, and I'm still not sure if there's a logical explanation for everything or not. When you walk through the door, there's a place for your shoes and to hang up your coats. I decided that I was going to start there, because it was the easiest thing to do. The dog wasn't allowed downstairs, so there was a small gate to keep her from going down there. Even if there wasn't a gate there, she could have caused the sound because she was sitting on my lap. I was finding the matches to the shoes and placing them off to the side, so when I was done I could place them back with their matches in the right spot. The dog was asleep on my lap when I hear a loud roar, then crash in the basement. There was nobody home. I just watched Elle get on the bus to go to the summer program. S had left for work shortly before that. I figured at first it was just a mouse or something causing something to fall, but it sounded too heavy to be caused by a mouse or a draft. I didn't look downstairs because I was too scared to check things, so I continued on with my cleaning. A few days later, Jay had gotten out of the hospital and was able to do the things she needed to do. The spring that just passed was eventful. I had gone with Jay and Elle to Florida, and Jay had sold her car to a lady she knew. The lady took the car, but never paid for it. The 2 of us had to go to court to get the money from her, because she refused to pay the couple $100 she said she was going to pay back in January. It was now June. Jay couldn't drive all that well because she was on painkillers. So we picked up a friend of hers, and I knew him very well, and the 3 of us made our way into the downtown part of the city court. On our way back from court, we were at a stoplight, and she tapped the bumper of another person's car. We had to go to the insurance place, but I was hungry and hadn't eaten breakfast yet. So we stopped at the house. She told me to go in and make a bowl of cereal or something and to grab her cigarettes out of the garage. Well, I made my way into the kitchen and opened the cupboard, and to the garage door I went, and then right past the basement stairs. Right after I opened the cupboard door, I heard a cough from the basement. Jay was still in the car, so it couldn't have been her. Nobody else was in the house, and the dog couldn't have made that kind of sound, even if she tried. I told Jay later that day, and I told Elle. The third event happened when I was sitting on the couch while Jay was napping on the air mattress in the living room because S didn't want me to clean the bedroom and Jay couldn't sleep in the dirty room. So I was on my phone and the TV was off, but once again I hear a cough from the basement. It couldn't have been Jay, it came from downstairs, not next to me. I told Elle and Jay, but Elle didn't believe me this time and told me that I was just trying to scare her. The last event was the worst and scared both of us to the point of tears. Jay and S decided to go for a drive and talk things out because they had been fighting. Elle and I were home with the dog. This took place right after dinner, so it was probably 9 p.m. The only thing we were asked to do was do the dishes and steam off the kitchen and dining room floors. I decided to wash the dishes and Elle could mop. I was finishing up the dishes and Elle was sitting on the air mattress places against the wall with a bay window. She had called out to me and told me that she heard tapping on the windows. I went into the living room and sat on the couch and listened. It couldn't have been the air mattress as it wasn't tall enough to touch the window, and it sounded like fingers hitting glass, not plastic rubbing against the wall. The two of us kind of freaked out and grabbed the dog and went into her room. There was no rain that night, no thunder. I would have seen raindrops on the window in front of the kitchen sink. The neighborhood we live in is quiet, and everyone lives so close to each other, so there were no trees in between the houses. The two of us and the dog sat on her bed and waited. I began hearing footsteps slowly waking up the stairs of the basement. Elle heard it too, and I shut the door. Unfortunately, my friend's lock was on the other side of the door, so we couldn't lock ourselves in. There was a tapping on the windows again. The windows weren't normal windows. They were high up near the ceiling and were impossible to reach by standing on the ground. The tapping started slow, but gradually began to speed up. There was tapping on the window above my head, and I began hearing footsteps in the kitchen and dining room. I was not sure which, though. The footsteps weren't slow, but it was taking a long time for the steps to get from the kitchen to the dining room. The dog heard it too and began growling and barking at the door. Elle and I began crying, and I told her that I wasn't lying about the things I heard in the house. She said she believed me, and we called her mother. Jay said that we'd be fine, to just turn on the TV or something, and that they'd be home in a few minutes. A few minutes turned into half an hour, and the footsteps were slowing down, and so was the tapping. There was no sign of rain or anything. There we were. There were no water droplets on the glass, and there was no wind to cause the sound. The houses were too close together for it to be a tree, and there was no trees next to that window anyway. We called again, telling her to come home. She said she was on her way, and about 5 minutes later, they were home. We had turned on the TV, and that's when everything stopped. There were no more violence happening on the windows, and there were no more footsteps. The tapping sounded as if someone was playing the piano with all 10 fingers very quickly, except on glass and not a piano. We told her about what happened, but she didn't believe us, of course. I'm not sure what we were hearing, but I'm just glad we didn't get hurt. Number 3. This encounter took place around 10 years ago. I was 15 years old. I grew up in a place called Clodagh, a small town outside of Dublin, Ireland. The town is very old. It had started as an old monastic settlement in the 6th or 7th century, and to this day still contains remnants of old buildings and infrastructures from that era. There's a huge park on the outskirts of the town, which is frequented by many people daily due to its wide range of recreational facilities, such as fishing ponds, baseball fields, and playgrounds. It is a really beautiful park, and I spent many memorable summers and weekends just hanging around over there with friends. Like most old towns, however, Gladakin was not without its urban legends. One such legend was about a section of the park known as the Devil's Passage. This section started as there were a particular location in the park that contained a cursed tree and features a lot of satanic worship. I won't go into too much detail about the legend, but you can read some interesting forum discussions about the place online. The origins of the legend are questionable at best, though, but having visited the supposed location, I can see exactly why such mystery surrounds the place. The Devil's Passage is a particularly enclosed massive stone walls creating some kind of courtyard feature, possibly the remains of an old building. Last time I visited the location, it contained a large digger and piles of dirt, like it was undergoing some sort of construction or something. At the back of the wall enclosure, there was a small grove in the trees that contained the alleged cursed tree. In reality, this tree was pretty weird looking. It appeared to be floating. The bottom of the tree was cut off, yet it was entwined amongst the other branches of the adjacent trees. So, even though I could always knew it obviously wasn't haunted or cursed, it still always gave me the creeps, regardless. Anyways, there's a bit of context about the place where this terrifying event took place. On Halloween of 2006, my two friends and I thought it would be fun to spend the night at the Devil's Passage for shits and giggles. We were all very much into paranormal, and we could think of no better place to spend Halloween. Looking back now, it was a pretty fucking stupid idea. It was such a secluded area in such a large park on a night when the whole city was getting out drunk and partying. After telling our parents we were going trick-or-treating, we headed off to the park around 6 p.m. We had set up our spot at the very back of the grove within the Devil's Passage, next to some boulders we used as seats. We decided to light a fire using some old newspaper, and we found some sticks laying around. Looking around at all the empty beer bottles, burnt wood, and graffiti, it was clear this place was a hot spot for underage drinking and debauchery. Thankfully, we were the only ones here on this particular night. Well, at least for the first few hours. After a short while spent sipping on beers that my friend managed to steal from his dad, and puffing on cigarettes, we were visited by this middle-aged man. All of us panicked and started stomping out the small fire we had going. As the man approached, we could see that he was wearing a formal black suit with white gloves. This man clearly wasn't the park ranger trying to kick us out. He was middle-aged, gray hair, and a goatee. We yelled a "hello" over to him, just to see what he wanted, though. He just smiled and kept walking towards us. He told us not to worry, that we weren't in any kind of trouble. We asked him who he was then and what he wanted from us. He said he was throwing a bit of a party at that location tonight and asked if we would like to stay for it. At first, my friends and I looked at each other with some disbelief. Was he joking? This guy certainly didn't look like the partying type, especially not the type to host a party on the park on Halloween. We told him that it was possibly best if we just head off, and that we were sorry to intrude on this party spot. He kept insisting that we stay, and he could offer us free booze and drugs. He even told us that there'd be girls coming that would love to fuck us. While his proposal began to entice my two friends, I was now starting to freak out. Why did my friends think this was weird that a middle-aged man was inviting a bunch of 15-year-olds to a party in the woods? After a few minutes of him trying to convince us to stay, it all became way too intense for me, and I interrupted him saying that we have to go. My friends looked at me puzzled. "We might as well stay for a few more drinks, it's not even 9 p.m. yet," one said. I reluctantly agreed, but told him I'd be leaving by 10 with or without them. The more time we spent there, the more unsettled I felt. The man, who told us his name was Stuart, started asking us really weird and personal questions like if we were virgins and if we'd ever had sex with another guy and even if we'd be willing to have an orgy. There was something clearly wrong with this guy. He seemed normal at first, but the more he spoke, the more he revealed himself to be batshit fucking insane. I don't know what this guy was doing here, but definitely wanted to stay for some other reason. He kept telling us that the other partygoers would be coming very shortly with plenty of alcohol and drugs, but no one ever arrived. It was as if he was stalling and trying to keep us there for as long as he possibly could. Eventually, I grew tired of waiting around. It wasn't wasting time with this creepy fuck. I told him that my friends and I were leaving and that we'd see him later. As I began to walk away, Stuart became very anxious. He practically begged me to stick around. At first, he was polite, playful even, joking about how I was letting my friends down and that I'll regret if I don't stay. When I refused again, the threat started to come. My heart sank. He told me that he'll kick the shit out of me if I try to leave. His manner quickly changed from being friendly to downright aggressive. My friends finally started to back me up. They told the man that if he was going to be a dickhead, they would also leave. He took out a knife from inside his jacket and started brandishing it and saying that nobody would be going anywhere. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, I picked up a big log from the ground and whacked him across the head with it. I screamed at the top of my lungs for him to get the fuck away from us and dragged my friends by the arm and started running as fast as I could to get out of there. He chased us for a little while, screaming about how his friends would intercept us on the way out and they'd catch us. He eventually gave up on his pursuit though, and we managed to escape unharmed. To this day, I don't know who that guy was or what his motives were. So, creepy suited guy in the park, let's never meet. Hey guys, this is Scare Doctor here. This was originally going to be a paranormal video solely. However, the last one was about a cursed place, so I figured I'd throw it in there as a little bit extra. They were a little longer than normal. I hope you guys don't mind. Leave me some feedback about the length. If you want them longer, shorter in the comments. I'm going to try to get another video up sometime over the weekend. I apologize for the crazy schedule. I've been, trying to get ready for my college classes starting back and working full time. And, it's crazy right now. So just forgive me. And like I say, leave me some feedback in the comments if you would. If you guys want to hear anything in particular, also, let me know. Alright, I will upload one hopefully this weekend. And remember to always be aware of your surroundings.